Despite his relentless criticism of Donald Trump, controversial comedian and political commentator Bill Maher has earned the reputation of being MAGA's favorite liberal because he criticizes progressives, culture war issues, and wokeism, things that MAGA Republicans tend to value. But on the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, he pissed MAGA off by dedicating his entire New Rules segment to calling MAGA out brutally for being the authoritarian cult of personality that they are. You have to see this. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got several clips to play from this New Rule segment from the most recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher. And I'll say again in advance, Maher is a mixed bag for me. I think he leans too much into culture war issues and he breathes life into nonsense niche issues that the right loves to exploit. But when it comes to recognizing that Democratic lawmakers are far better than their Republican counterparts and recognizing that Donald Trump is an authoritarian, malignant narcissist, he is unwavering, and so I got to give him credit there. But in this New Rule segment, he tries to use the credibility that he has gained with MAGA Republicans and MAGA pundits to call them out for their cultish, dangerous behavior. So we're going to play these clips and unpack it together.
And finally, New Rule to those on the right who keep asking me, Bill, you're so good at roasting the woke nonsense peddlers. Why don't you go all the way and join us? Let me give you the short answer. Because I don't want to live in North Korea.
You can probably see where it's going. The full 9-minute segment is definitely worth your time, but we're going to play a smattering of clips to make the point, okay? This is something that we hear a lot of from MAGA Republicans and centrists who align with Trump, which is that, Bill Maher is just so close to being full-blown MAGA. We just need to nudge him in the right direction. He is reportedly going to meet with Donald Trump at the White House at the invitation of Kid Rock. Much has been made about this. I don't expect Bill Maher to sell out or bend the knee in fear the way that other liberal commentators or liberal media personalities may have done, like Joe and Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough from MSNBC's Morning Joe. I don't expect that that's the case because I think Maher has backbone, even though I disagree with a lot of his convictions on culture war issues. He seems to be pretty resolute. But he's saying, hey, listen, you want me on your side? Here's why that will never happen. And again, he goes into so many examples, but here's the next clip.
And these bills they've introduced to make Trump's birthday a holiday and put him on currency and Mount Rushmore. This is not what we do here, guys. He's still in office, for God's sake. Can we see how it turns out before we put him on a stamp?
And this is important. As I pointed out in multiple videos, the Republicans have had control of Congress since January, right? Okay, not just the House of Representatives, but also the Senate and the White House, and they have a sympathetic conservative supermajority in the United States Supreme Court. They have full trifecta control, the likes of which Democrats would love to have and have not had in decades. What have they done with all this power? Well, you have Republican lawmakers suggesting that we should actually modify the 22nd Amendment to permit Trump to run for a third term. You've had multiple bills proposing that Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C. be renamed after Trump. You've had multiple bills suggesting that the Gulf of Mexico or a body of water near the southern United States be renamed after Trump. You've had proposals, yes, that would, just as President Washington's birthday, commemorated President's Day, that Donald Trump's birthday be made a national holiday. Yes, bills to propose that he be put on currency or that new currency be made to put his face on it, even though the tradition is you don't put any living person's face on currency and Donald Trump is still alive. And on and on and on and on it goes. I mean, this is what they do. Imagine if the shoe were on the other foot. And this is what Democrats did with President Biden or President Obama or President Clinton. We've just never seen this level of cultishness from the Democratic Party. It's absolutely deranged. And they have the power. It would be bad enough if they were in the minority and pulling these bullshit cultish, virtue signals in the minority, but they're in the majority. They control the legislative agenda and the legislative trajectory of the country, and this is what they're doing with their power. It just goes to show that their priorities are not about providing stable, meaningfully beneficial governance for their own constituents. It's about virtue signaling to a cult leader the way that they do in North Korea. So the comparison's appropriate. Here's another clip.
If I admit that there is a level of Trump derangement syndrome on the left, will you admit that this shit is also deranged? All the people...
They won't. Okay, so I reject the premise that Trump derangement syndrome exists on the left. I think it's perfectly fair to, be concerned about the things that Donald Trump has said and promised and done and threatened to do in the future. I think that that's okay. The real Trump derangement syndrome that exists, and it does exist, is on the right. It is deranged to use your power and your energy to foist this man up above the Constitution. You may recall that we have polls around the Trump immunity decision, Trump v. United States, where presidential immunity came into existence as a consequence of the Roberts Court, that most Americans oppose presidential immunity, which is good. About 3/4 of Americans think that presidents should not be given presidential immunity. That's good. It should be 100%, but whatever. But when you change the polling question from should presidents be given immunity to should Donald Trump be given immunity, the amount of Republican support, the number of Republican support skyrockets. In other words, Republicans generally don't believe that presidents should be given immunity, but they want Donald Trump to be given immunity because it has become an authoritarian cult of personality. That is deranged. That is deranged to an unprecedented degree. There has been no meaningful bloc of the Democratic Party that is as politically deranged as that right there. And by the way, if a meaningful bloc of Democrats ever said, well, I don't think Democrats should be given immunity, but Joe Biden should, or Barack Obama should, or Bill Clinton should, I would be saying the same thing. I would disavow that, condemn that, and mock those people. This is a democratic constitutional republic, and we shouldn't have kings, and we should not venerate kings, and we should not seek to make the president, be it Republican or Democrat, a king. But that's not an attitude that exists in the Republican Party. The Republican Party is thirsty for a monarchy. It's really disgusting, and it should be condemned, and it should be made fun of. Here's the last clip I want to play from this new rule segment.
At the end of Trump's first term, there were still some people who would occasionally correct him on little details, like you lost that last election. But now we have Lauren Boebert saying we must rally behind President Trump to secure his third term, something Steve Bannon is advocating for as well. And you just know that soon the entire Republican Party will be on this page. Okay, there's no fuzz on this. It's as clear as 1, 2, 3. Presidents get 2 terms, not more, no matter how wonderful you think they are. It's written in black and white in the Constitution. Guys, you know this is wrong. You know in your heart this is the moment when Rome stops being a republic. So come on, be like those mice and grow a pair of balls.
So that was a reference to one part in the new rule monologue when Bill Maher references transgenic mice instead of transgender mice. You may recall that during the joint session of Congress, Donald Trump made reference, we're funding transgender mice. It's not true. We were funding projects related to transgenic mice to basically determine how they can handle, experimental cancer treatments, which would have a potential enormous benefit for humanity, right? Because mice have been used for experimentation. They're one of the bedrock, tools of experimentation for centuries. And that's meaningfully different than, trying to experiment to make mice transgender, which is just not a thing. Trump lied. Okay, that was the reference that he made there at the end. But again, this is true. An increasing number of prominent Republicans are advocating for Trump to run for a third term. And this is nothing new. There were essays to that effect during 2022 or 2023, right after Donald Trump indicated that he was going to run for a second term. There's so much more interest in Trump running for a third term or being, eligible for third, fourth, subsequent terms, basically until he dies, than there ever has been on the Democratic side in modern history. The only president to serve more than 2 terms was President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, because that predated the 22nd Amendment. See, President Washington established the 2-term precedent, and most people venerated Washington enough to follow that precedent religiously. President Roosevelt, who I think is the third greatest American president after Washington, after Lincoln, and then there's FDR, because there was no hard-written rule, and then you had the Great Depression, the Second World War, he ran for 4 terms, and then he died in his 4th term. This is afterwards. The 22nd Amendment was codified to enshrine that Washingtonian precedent into law. The fact that Republicans want to break with it is, again, another indicator that they are authoritarian and cultish in a way that, again, we've just never really seen before from a political party. President Obama was certainly charismatic, and he certainly inspired a bunch of people. His inaugural crowd, of course, substantially larger than Donald Trump. But we never saw anything like this, certainly not from elected lawmakers who are supposed to be thought leaders and, shepherds of their own party, right? It's bad enough that so many rank and file Republicans are so derangedly devoted to Donald Trump. It's even worse that the people who are supposed to lead them and guide them and be moral exemplars for them, like, unfortunately, Lauren Boebert, right? And she's obviously not one, but she's supposed to be because she's an elected representative. She's supposed to lead, not merely reflect the worst impulses of her base. But that's precisely what she's doing. So as Maher notes in this new rule, he expects that as time goes on, because remember, we're only 2 months into this second administration, there will be an increasing number of prominent Republicans who advocate for a reinterpretation of the 22nd Amendment to allow Donald Trump to run for a third term. And again, he gives other examples in this new rule. Like he calls out Steve Bannon and MAGA Republicans for being upset at Amy Coney Barrett, a Trump appointee to the United States Supreme Court, because during the joint session of Congress, when the Supreme Court showed up, they said that her face was not sufficiently, did not sufficiently admire Donald Trump. She didn't seem like, star-studded and in awe of him. She just had kind of a blank, neutral expression on her face. This is where we are. So I like this. Again, Bill Maher is a mixed bag for me. He frustrates me a lot with being concerned with culture war issues that do not materially matter. Certainly not in the way that Republican excesses matter to this country. But I like the fact that even though they are desperate to win him over because they think that that will further undermine liberals, progressives, the left in general, he's standing firm and saying, like, listen, even though I share certain sympathies with you on these culture war issues, I'm not going to go to your side because your side is just worse. It remains worse. And as he says, this is a two-way street. And unfortunately, I think he's going to realize it's not. The cult of personality is not a two-way street. They enjoy you criticizing their opponents, but they will never accept your criticisms of them or their cult leader. So either way, though, it was a great new rule segment. You should definitely check it out. And in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.